Hello. Welcome to a poetry discussion of Percy Shelley's Ozymandias. The purpose for this video is to discuss some of the elements in that poem, but also to use it as a transition point to the Epic of Gilgamesh. One of our concerns in both Sezene G by Arthur C. Clarke and Knock by Frederick Brown was what it meant to be the last person left alive, and what that had to do with the idea of the study of the end of the world. That idea of the end of the world, eschatology is the term that we were using, is that it is a study, and there's different ways of imagining the end, and there's different ways of imagining one's own ending. And so we can think both of the end of the world and the deletion of it, to use some of the language from Sezene G, but there's also the idea that people come after, the idea of hope. And this is something where Shelley's Ozymandias is really an important idea. So let's look at this poem and see what we shall see. It's very familiar, and so some of what I say is pretty well known. I do want to focus, though, on the ideas in the poem that will help frame our movement through the course of this semester. Percy Shelley, Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well these passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Something to mention outright is, of course, that this is a sonnet. That is, it itself is a work of art, a deliberate style of poetry that requires tremendous control. And one of the things that will be a concern to us is, how do you leave behind a monument, a memory, often a warning as well? And so as we work through this poem, I want you to think about the poem itself as maybe a lifeless thing that is given life whenever we read it. But let's just begin at the beginning. I, the speaker says, met a traveler from an antique land. And so immediately we are asked, I think, to compare these different places. If the traveler is from the antique land, that means the I, the speaker of the poem, is from what? A modern land, a contemporary land, the new world? Perhaps. What about the traveler? Is this traveler somebody that's from the same place as the I, and so they're traveling back from that antique land? Or is the traveler originally from the antique land and has arrived and is talking to the speaker of the poem? Whatever you decide, and however you construct your argument, you still have to deal with the words of the traveler. And the traveler has said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert." So what is this? Well, this is a statue. And specifically, it is a broken statue, right? They are trunkless, meaning they don't have the trunk, the part of the body that extends between your neck and your pelvis. And they're vast, they're large, they're expansive, and they're standing still in the desert. The traveler continues, "Near them, on the sand half sunk, a shattered visage lies." So this means that in one part of the desert, we have the legs, and then near them is the visage, the head, and it is shattered. So let's shatter my head a little bit. And we get some details about it. The statue has a frown and wrinkled lips. Notice that detail of wrinkled lips. That's an accomplished act of statuary. And even more than that, it has a sneer of cold command. So those three phrases, we go from frown, monosyllabic, to wrinkled lip, a trisyllabic phrase where we have an adjective-noun pairing, and then we get a sneer, also monosyllabic, of cold command, a descriptive phrase that is subjective, right? A wrinkled lip, everybody can say, oh, that's a wrinkled lip. A frown, yes, that's a frown. But cold command, that's subjective. That's the point of view of the traveler. And the traveler now moves to what I think is, for us, one of the most important lines in this poem, and they also appear in the middle. Beginnings, middles, and ends are often very important in works of literature, and this is no exception. And this is the traveler is turning into an art critic and says, these elements, these small details, tell, an important word because that means that the statue is speaking, and it says, the sculptor well these passions read. So notice a really exciting idea inside of this line. We begin with telling, oral storytelling, right? The idea of an oral tradition. And we end with read, the idea of a textual tradition. And so the sculptor who is in the middle is the person both first reading something and then retelling it. The sculptor then becomes somebody that has to translate. And one of the important things that we'll be doing together is reading works in translation, thinking about what comes across. Translation comes from the Latin word translatio, which literally etymologically means to carry something across. Latio, trans. And as a result of the sculptor, these passions yet survive. So what is the role of the artist? Well, the artist can convey a form of immortality. And the artist also gives us the idea of stamping. So when you make a stamp, you impress something. It has the idea of conveying permanence. And it stamps life, survival, onto a lifeless thing. So again, the single poetic line is giving us a movement. So the line before gave us from telling to reading. The next line gives us survival to lifeless. It's almost a form of resurrection as well. And we continue. And this is all describing the sculptor. The sculptor has the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. So it's the artistic nature, the summoning of the muse is in that heart that feeds life. And so fed connects to life, right? Because you need food to sustain yourself. And then we get a really, well, just before that, a really interesting word, mocked. Mocked is polyvalent. Polyvalent means that it's capable of having more than one meaning. So mocking can mean to make fun of, as you might be familiar with, but mock is also to imitate, such as a mockingbird imitating a certain cry. And this gives us the sense of ambiguity in art. We continue because it's not just the image that's there. We also combine text and image. And anybody that's worked with me knows that this is an obsession of mine, this idea of how do text and image interact, how do they interlock. And so we get this moment. On the pedestal, these words appear. Words on a pedestal, words written in stone, that's called epigraphy. And this is, it's a great study. Like you can go into epigraphy, epigraphic studies, and make a career out of reading words on stones. In some ways as well, the cuneiform tablets that form Gilgamesh are also kind of epigraphic and stamping. It's all fits in. Again, this poem is not responding directly to Gilgamesh. It is responding to excavations that happen in Egypt, between Britain and Egypt. So it does have a sense of colonialism that's there, but that's beside the point right now. Let's look at this epigraphy. The epigraphy says, "My name My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. So you're going to want to pay attention to that quotation mark, that internalized quotation mark, because this my is not the same as the I at the start. So a circle with a line through it means not the same. Right? We have a new speaker now. We're having direct quotation, but it's actually internalized quotation, right? Because when we start with the speaker, I met a traveler. The speaker then says, too vast and trunkless. And then the speaker also says, the king is quoted as speaking inside of this. And so we get a kind of what you might want to call an inception of speakers in a really fascinating way. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Well, to whom is that king speaking? To whom is Ozymandias speaking? The idea is when it was a full statue, most likely speaking to the king's enemies, or those that might want to come and attack the kingdom, right? Look on my works. Well, what are the works? Nothing. Remember, we had the desert, we had the sand, we had the statue itself being broken. And the poet actually continues. Well, the traveler continues. Nothing beside remains. There's nothing else other than this broken, this leg, this visage, and this piece of epigraphy. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. There are no mighty works, and yet there is one work that we might call mighty, one work that attests to the survival of Ozymandias and his reputation. And what is that work? That work, of course, is the statue. And so the work of art is immortal. So we don't know the name of the artist, but the artist, anonymous, has rendered this statue life by turning it into a story, which then is spread to the traveler. The traveler sees it. The traveler then brings it to the speaker of this poem, and now we read it, reinvigorating all of these different stages with new life. Colossal wreck might remind us of another kind of colossal, the Colossus of Rhodes, giving us this sense of impermanence with large objects. And then we get a little flair of the poetic as Shelley embraces alliteration for boundless and bare, and alliteration acts to draw attention to different words as deliberate word choices. And then we also have that with lone and level. So what's happening here? Again, I want to connect this to the thoughts that I began with, that Percy Shelley is celebrating the role of the artist, the sculptor that well those passions read, and himself as an artist writing this poem, and then also us. So we are reading the work that Shelley has written. So let's use some of these ideas to think of two big questions that we want to carry with us on as we go through the semester. So what does this poem say about memory? What does it say about story and telling stories? Are there different ways to tell stories than just what you might be used to? And what is the role of artist in society? If you didn't pick up on, if you can't answer maybe that last one, I would recommend you rewatch the video, because that's going to be a really important concept. Secondly, what does this poem say about other cultures? Does it seem to have a bias? Does it center one location from another location? So I mentioned briefly the idea of colonialism in that. So you might look into that a little bit more, or just think about what's available to you from the story. After all, there's another act of translation that happened, which is the traveler is translating the epigraphy into English for us, because it wouldn't have been written in English originally, where the desert was. So what does this have to do with Gilgamesh? Well, let's look at some of the beginning of Gilgamesh in that first tablet. This is from tablet 1, and it's lines 9 to 17. Oh, actually, it's going to be 2 before that, so it's going to be 7 to 17. He, Gilgamesh, saw what was secret, discovered what was hidden. He brought back a tale of before the deluge. So here we have, let's use a different color there because I'm writing on white. We have Gilgamesh as another person that's bringing back stories from one place to another to convey them, to give them new life. And we get more. He came a far road, was weary, found peace. And most importantly, he set all his labors on a tablet of stone. Remember that word epigraphy that we were looking at? Think about the cuneiform tablets as well. So this is a really important idea. Gilgamesh is an artist. He's presented as an artist at the beginning, a writer, lending things immortality. And as we keep working with the idea of immortality in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we'll be coming back to this line. So make sure you paid attention to it. In addition to writing the story, he built the rampart of Uruk, the sheepfold, of Holy Eanna, the sacred storehouse. So he's building a city, a place that one might hope survives. And there you might think again of mighty works. The speaker of this poem turns to the paean at this point and asks the reader to see its wall like a strand of wool, view its parapet that none could copy, right? This unique work of art. The city itself cannot be copied, cannot be imitated, can't be plagiarized. And then continues a little bit. Take the stairway of a bygone era, draw near to Eanna, seat of Ishtar the goddess, that no later king could ever copy. So one of the things that I'll hope you'll pick up on are some thematic connections between this, one of the most ancient works of literature that survived, that we have access to read, and Shelley's early 19th century poem, where he's reflecting on the idea of art and survival, kingship and power, and keep these thoughts in mind as we go through the semester.